The movie begins with Professor Joseph Hyder sitting in his Mercedes, looking at a picture. In the picture, 3 dogs are positioned one behind the other in a line. Just then, a truck pulls over, and the driver heads into the forest to relieve himself. Professor Joseph raises his gun and shoots him. We are introduced to 2 young women, Jenny and Lindsay. They are from the United States, vacationing in Germany. They were on their way to a party at a club, and Lindsay was on the phone getting directions. Although they were experienced travelers, they were unfamiliar with Germany. They are driving a rental car at night, trying to find the party, but they don't know the exact location. Driving through a forest, they realize they are lost and in trouble when Jenny makes a U-turn and the car gets a flat tire. They try to call for roadside assistance, but being in the forest, their phones have no signal. They're stranded on a deserted road with nothing but woods around them. They decide to stay in the car and wait for someone to pass by. Soon, a car approaches, and they try to get help. The man in the car sees that they are alone and begins to harass them verbally. Terrified, they lock the car doors. The car then drives away. They decide to look for a house to call for help. Late at night, they start walking into the forest. They spot a light coming from a house and head toward it. Suddenly, it starts to rain heavily. They are soaked by the time they reach the house. They knock, and Professor Joseph opens the door. They explain their situation and ask him to call a tow truck for them. Seeing they are alone, the professor invites them inside. Inside, there is a strange and disturbing painting that catches their attention. The professor asks if they are tourists, and one of them replies that they are from New York, visiting Germany. She again asks the professor to call for help, but he ignores her request. He then asks, "Are you relatives?" She replies, "No, we are friends." The professor goes to the kitchen to get them some water. He makes a fake phone call, leading Jenny and Lindsay to believe he's calling for help. He secretly drugs the water. Lindsay drinks it, but Jenny drops her glass. Seeing this, the professor becomes hostile. He goes to the basement, pretending to clean up the water. Downstairs, he fills a syringe. Meanwhile, Lindsay begins to feel the effects of the drug. Jenny, unaffected, again asks him to call, but he refuses. He then injects Jenny in the neck, and she immediately faints. Later, the professor is seen having breakfast. Jenny and Lindsay awaken in the professor's laboratory. They find themselves tied to beds. Alongside them is a man, also captive, who is the truck driver from earlier. The professor enters the lab and informs the man that he is not a suitable match, and that it's time for him to die. He then injects a toxin into the man's arteries, killing him instantly. He buries the driver's body in his garden. The professor then kidnaps another man, rendering him unconscious with anesthesia. This man, from Japan, is now placed on a bed next to Jenny and Lindsay. They all regain consciousness and begin to scream, terrified of what the professor has planned for them. He steps forward to explain his intentions, introducing himself as Professor Joseph, a retired surgeon. He is a mad doctor whose specialty was conjoining living creatures. He recently performed the surgery on 3 dogs, attaching them one behind the other. Now the mad doctor plans to perform the same operation on Jenny, Lindsay, and the Japanese man. He chose them because their tissue types are a match. He proceeds to describe the details of the operation. First, he will sever their knee ligaments, rendering them unable to stand. He will attach subject B to the rear of subject A, and subject C to the rear of subject B. He will graft skin from their hips onto their faces. He will connect the 3 of them as shown in his diagram. So, when subject A consumes food, its waste will pass into the mouth of subject B, and then into the mouth of subject C. It is a cheap and disgusting process that no sane person would ever perform. But this doctor is insane and enjoys his grotesque experiments. This will be his first time performing it on humans. First, he injects the Japanese man with a sedative, rendering him unconscious. Jenny screams loudly as the professor attempts to inject her as well. Meanwhile, Lindsay manages to chew through her restraints and escapes. An IV needle is still in her arm, tearing her skin and causing bleeding. She runs into a room and shuts the door. The professor arrives and smashes the room's window. Lindsay escapes again, but falls into a swimming pool. The professor follows her and covers the pool with a lid. Suddenly, the power goes out. Lindsay uses the darkness to escape. She returns to the lab and unties her friend Jenny, who is unconscious from the injection. She drags Jenny outside, but the professor finds them. He injects Lindsay and she too falls unconscious. He carries both of them back to the lab. He then begins the operation, first removing their ligaments and teeth. He uses a marker to draw incision lines on their bodies. He then removes skin from their hips and faces, performing the lengthy operation. A few days later, the professor is seen drinking. In front of him, his human centipede lies on the floor. Their wounds are still fresh, and the professor tries to force them to stand. They were connected with the Japanese man at the front, Lindsay in the middle, and Jenny at the rear. Jenny at the end is the tail of the centipede. Despite their pain, the professor forces them to stand for a photograph. He then shows them their reflection in a mirror. Seeing their horrific condition, they begin to cry. He keeps them in a cage, treating them like animals. This continues for many days. He forces the Japanese man to eat like a dog. The professor again abuses him. The professor continues to treat them cruelly, taking them outside. The Japanese man needs to defecate. His waste is forced into Lindsay's mouth. Lindsay is forced to swallow it, a disgusting and horrifying process. The professor checks their medical condition. He finds that the Japanese man is fine, but Lindsay has an infection because she is not properly digesting the man's waste. Jenny, at the end, is not receiving any nourishment and is growing weaker. Her wounds are septic and she appears to be dying. The professor considers replacing Jenny. Suddenly, there's a knock at the door. It's two police officers. The police are investigating the disappearance of Jenny and Lindsay, whose car was found not far from the professor's house. The professor claims to be a busy doctor who rarely leaves the house. He denies knowing anything about the missing girls. The professor offers them a drink, but they ask for coffee. He insists they will only have water. His behavior makes the officers suspicious. The professor prepares the water, adding a drug to it. An officer mentions that someone reported hearing screams from his house. They also found his Mercedes near the truck of another missing person. Hearing this, he becomes agitated and insists they drink the water. They refuse and knock the glasses away. Using a towel as an excuse, he goes to get a syringe. He intends to sedate them, but this time, the police officers catch him. He protests, saying they can't harass him without reason. He claims they can't accuse him without a warrant. The officers leave to get a warrant. The professor returns to his lab, but the human centipede is gone. They are hiding. The Japanese man stabs him in the stomach with a scalpel. The professor collapses. The Japanese man then slits the professor's throat. They then attempt to crawl upstairs. Weak from the surgery, they struggle to climb. Their stitches are bleeding. As they climb, the professor, still alive, comes after them. He starts licking their blood from the steps. The Japanese man breaks a mirror just as the doctor reaches them. He uses a shard of glass to cut his own throat, killing himself. At that moment, the police officers return. They don't see anyone at first. They check the lab, but it's empty. One of the officers begins to feel dizzy from the drug in the water he partially drank. The other officer continues to search and finds the girls. Their condition is horrific. The officer goes to find the professor. He finds him by the pool. His partner is dead. The professor has the dead officer's pistol and shoots the other officer. The officer returns fire, shooting Professor Joseph. They both die, leaving only the now two-segment centipede. It was the grotesque experiment of a madman. The movie ends.